Either you start covering more of the expenses, or I don't see how we keep living like this. She said it casually, like she was asking me to pick up milk on the way home. No discussion, no numbers, just an expectation delivered as a conclusion she'd already reached. We had shared finances. Same checking account for rent, utilities, groceries. We'd agreed on percentages based on income when we moved in, and I'd stuck to that every month without fail. I made more, so I paid more. That was the deal. When I asked what changed, she shrugged and said costs were up and she was stressed. Then she added that since I was better off, it made sense for me to handle more so she could breathe. It wasn't framed as a request. It was an ultimatum dressed up as practicality. I pulled up our bank app right there on the couch. Not dramatically, just to understand what stressed meant in numbers. Our shared account balance was lower than it should have been. Not a little, enough to notice. She told me not to worry about it. That's when the second problem surfaced. She'd been moving money out of the joint account into her personal one. Small transfers at first, then larger ones. A few subscription charges I didn't recognize. Credit card payments that weren't ours. I asked her directly if she had debt. She said everyone had some debt and that it wasn't my business because it was from before we lived together. Then she got annoyed that I was auditing her instead of focusing on being supportive. I wasn't auditing. I was trying to understand why I was suddenly being told to pay more when money was already disappearing. She explained it fast, like a rehearsed speech. She'd put some things on cards: travel, clothes, helping a friend, a few emergencies that somehow never came up until now. She said it would even out once she caught up. When I asked how much the total was, she said the number didn't matter. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about rent or groceries. It was about shifting weight without consent. Over the next week, the pressure became constant. Little comments at dinner, jokes about how nice it must be to not worry about money, suggestions that a real partner wouldn't nickel and dime someone they loved. She stopped paying her full share and didn't say anything about it. I noticed because the utilities pulled short. When I brought it up, she told me she'd get it next time and that I was being rigid. I asked again about the debt. Calmly. I wanted transparency if we were sharing finances. She accused me of trying to control her. The ultimatum came back, sharper this time. Either I stepped up more financially, or we'd have to rethink things. She didn't define what that meant, but she didn't need to. It was implied that my role was to absorb the imbalance quietly. I started reviewing statements every night after she went to bed. Not obsessively, just enough to see patterns. New charges kept appearing. Cash advances, late fees, payments bouncing between accounts like she was trying to stay ahead of something chasing her. She never once asked if I was okay with covering more. She just adjusted her behavior as if the decision had already been approved. When I tried to talk about boundaries, she laughed and said I was overreacting because money was temporary and relationships were about flexibility. Then she reminded me that moving out would be complicated and expensive, as if that should settle it. I stopped engaging emotionally after that, not out of spite, out of clarity. I paid what I had always agreed to pay, no more. I didn't argue when she hinted. I didn't reassure her when she sighed about bills. I didn't rescue gaps she created. She noticed. Her tone changed. The jokes stopped. She started acting irritated, then cold. One night she asked if I was pulling away. I told her I was paying attention. She rolled her eyes and said I was making things harder than they needed to be. That if I really cared, I'd stop questioning and just help. I went to bed that night knowing this wasn't a rough patch. It was a structure, and it was designed with me as the silent support beam. I didn't tell her what I was thinking. I didn't threaten. I didn't negotiate. I just started preparing to stop being useful. A few days later, she doubled down. I brought up the transfers again, this time asking for a clear number. Total debt, monthly minimums, timeline. If we were sharing finances, I needed to know what I was standing on. She didn't answer the questions. She said I was fixating on details because I was uncomfortable being the provider. Then she told me she felt unsafe discussing money with me because I made it transactional. That was the dismissal, clean and complete. She followed it by restating the expectation. She needed me to start covering the majority of expenses immediately so she could stabilize. No plan, no end date, just trust. I asked if she was still using the joint account for personal spending. She said yes because it was easier and we were a team. I asked if she planned to stop moving money out without telling me. She said I was being dramatic and that couples didn't ask permission for every little thing. At that point, the picture was clear. The ultimatum and the hidden debt weren't separate problems. They fed each other. She spent without limits, then leaned on me to absorb the fallout. My resistance wasn't a disagreement, it was an obstacle. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten to leave. I logged into the bank app and removed my direct deposit from the shared account. I left enough to cover my agreed portion of the month's bills and nothing more. The next morning, I opened a new checking account in my name only. My paycheck hit it 2 days later. I told her that evening. I kept it factual. I said I'd continue paying exactly what we'd agreed on originally, but I wouldn't be subsidizing expenses I didn't consent to or debt I wasn't allowed to see. She laughed at first, like she thought I was bluffing. Then she got angry. She said I was abandoning her when she needed support. She said I was proving I only cared about money. She accused me of punishing her instead of being a partner. I didn't debate any of it. I told her this was how it would be going forward. She tried one last angle. She said if I was going to act single, maybe I should live single. Not as a threat, as a suggestion meant to scare me into backing down. I agreed. That surprised her. I told her I'd be moving out at the end of the month. I said I'd pay my remaining share of rent and utilities as planned, but I wouldn't be renewing anything or covering gaps after that. She went quiet. Then she said I was overreacting and that we could talk about it later. She asked me not to make decisions while emotional. I told her I wasn't emotional. I was done sharing a financial system that worked against me. The days after that were tense and oddly calm. She stopped mentioning money directly. Instead, she acted like nothing was happening. She kept spending from the joint account, assuming I'd notice and intervene. I didn't. The first real consequence showed up before the week ended. A utility payment failed. I got the notification because my email was still attached. I didn't fix it. She asked me about it that night, annoyed but not panicked. I told her I'd already paid my portion and that she should check her account. She did. I watched her face change as she realized the buffer was gone. The safety net she'd been leaning on without acknowledging it had vanished quietly. No fight, no announcement, just absence. By the end of the week, she was recalculating everything, asking questions she hadn't cared about before, talking about budgets and timing and temporary adjustments. I listened. I didn't engage. I spent my evenings packing, not in a rush, just methodically separating my things from a system I no longer belonged to. She asked if I was really leaving. I said yes, and for the first time since this started, she didn't have a response ready. Final update. I moved out on a Tuesday morning. No speech, no last talk. I loaded my car, left the keys on the counter, and sent a short message confirming I'd paid my final share through the end of the month. I didn't block her. I just stopped responding. The consequences didn't arrive dramatically. They stacked. Within a week, the joint account overdrafted. I only knew because the bank sent me a final notice before fully separating the account. She had tried to float expenses the same way she always had, assuming money would land to cover it. It didn't. A few days later, she texted asking if I'd accidentally switched my deposit back. I didn't reply. Then the tone shifted. She asked if I could help temporarily while she got organized. She said things had piled up faster than expected. She said she hadn't realized how tight everything really was. I still didn't respond. The utilities didn't stay on long after that. Late notices came next. She started moving money between cards, then missing payments entirely. Fees stacked on top of fees. She reached out again, longer this time. She admitted the debt was higher than she'd said. She blamed stress, timing, bad luck. She said she felt like I'd pulled the floor out from under her. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I had pulled my weight out of a system that only worked because I was quietly absorbing the damage. She tried social pressure next. A mutual friend asked if we'd had a fight and whether I was really just leaving her stranded. I said we'd separated finances and living arrangements, and that was all. Apparently, she'd been telling people I blindsided her. By the end of the month, she couldn't keep the apartment. Not because I forced anything, because the math stopped working without me smoothing it over. She asked once more if we could talk in person. She said she missed me and that things were different now. I declined. After that, the messages slowed, then stopped. A few weeks later, I heard through someone else that she'd moved in with a friend temporarily, that she was selling things, that she was trying to negotiate payment plans with creditors she'd ignored for too long. None of that involved me. My life got quieter. My expenses became predictable again. My bank notifications stopped making my stomach tighten. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved. The relationship didn't end because of money. It ended because consent mattered to me and didn't to her. Because support had become a one-way transfer disguised as love. I never raised my voice. I never threatened. I never chased consequences. I just stepped out of the role she'd assigned me. Everything that followed happened on its own.